Welcome to Arash's World, where you will hear prominent voices, psychoanalysts, psychologists, therapists, philosophers, and thought leaders talk about a variety of mental health concerns and problems, including how to deal with anxiety, depression, and chronic conditions, and how to become more resilient, find inner peace, be emotionally engaged in your personal and professional life, and just be your beautiful, authentic self. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Arash's World. Today we have a very special guest, an amazing guest, Dr. Viktória Duda. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm really well. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Very good, thanks. And so I'd like to start off with the toughest question first. How would you briefly describe yourself? And you can focus on anything that of interest, anything you'd like to share here with us.
I think I like to refer myself best as a student of human nature.
Mhm.
That is something that includes things that I'm doing. I'm a hypnotherapist. I've studied some social anthropology. I do a lot of creative writing, but it all concentrates on understanding why we are here, where do we come from, where we are going. And actually, not so much from a philosophical point, but more like a practical point. I like to understand how we can better our lives, how we can get on a better level of evolution. And it's a student. I call myself a student because it's something I think you can't just study and then but it's something that you constantly study, evolve, experiment with, understand on a deeper level.
Yeah, it's a process, really. It's kind of like a journey,
It is
and
a
modify
process.
it. And sometimes you have to like maybe switch your route and go a different way, and that's good too, right? I think that's quite fascinating with topics like this. So, consciousness is important here, and you research it, you study it, I like also the practical aspect. I think that's very important of applying it, because what's the use of philosophy if you are not applying it to your life, if it's not practical? And I think that's an important
Absolutely.
part too. And so one of the things I'm fascinated with is, and that you do as well, is past lives. So how would you explain that? Or what would you say about past lives? And then again, I have some questions on that too.
Well, yeah, you said the big word, consciousness. And I think when I study consciousness, I think of it not as just something that is a biological product of the brain or a product of the biological evolution, but I think of it as the most fundamental thing in the universe. Everything arises from it. And I think that, the consciousness that is in you or that is working through you is essentially the same kind of consciousness that is in me or in every other sentient being, a little bit like the same molecules of water are in a glass of water and they are in the whole ocean. So I think that we have the fundamental creative principle, which is consciousness. And then it is evolving. It is something that is creating reality as we know it. And then it is evolving. So it is evolving not through just one life, but it's evolving through multiples of lives. Producing this phenomenon that we know as reincarnation. I think it's one of the most intriguing and also intellectually sometimes challenging concepts of what this is. But if I have to put it into very short explanations, and I would say it's a process through which consciousness, that is the fundamental principle is in the universe, is evolving. And we can observe that also in therapy when we work with a single individual, and that single individual can tap into something that is older than their brain.
And that is fascinating, because that idea of reincarnation, of coming back and so on, has been around for millennia. So that's something, it's again something that's been around, and people have thought about, religions believe in it and follow it. So I think that's quite fascinating. And you have a fascinating book too, called 25 Centuries Without You, that explores some of those issues too, in the concept of a novel. But again, very, very fascinating things, how things flow and are connected, and lives our own lives go back to other types of lives we've had. And I've had the absolute pleasure to have one of those readings about the past life with you. And it gave me fascinating insights. And although, there's this fear, it's like, what will come up? But once you learn that, you see that in my case, that a lot of the things that we go through in this life, in the current life, kind of similar things we've perhaps gone through in the past. And it's kind of like the stories have the same themes or motives that continue within the next life. And probably if it's not resolved, then in the next one. And so I find that very, in a way, also comforting.
It is very comforting. I like the phrase that Stan Grof used, condensed experiences. So he refers to those things that you're calling motifs, that we have the same issues coming back. They may be from this life. Also, when we do some past life regressions, they might come up there. If the person has dreams, it might come up in dreams and psychedelic experiences. But they all center around the same theme. And when we have that understanding, it also helps us to change negative traits into positive. We can see that something that we might find deeply traumatizing or deeply worrying could actually be the shadow side of something really great if we evolve it. And we can see that evolution through multiple lifetimes. One of my favorite examples is Demosthenes, who was a speaker, one of the greatest public speakers of ancient Greece. And the story that is his is that he was actually someone born with a speech impediment, and he was not able to say a coherent sentence. He was stammering as a child. So that is something that is one of those condensed experience things. He's born as a stammerer. And what can we do with that? If someone would have a magic wand and just make that go away, then probably today we wouldn't know his name. But we know his name because he was so bothered by it that he said, I need to do something about this. And legend has it that he went to the seaside and he would pebbles in his mouth and he was talking against the wind. And when his speech was audible under those circumstances, then it was good enough for him. And then he taught himself to speak. And he was speaking in greater and greater circles and in front of greater and greater audiences. And he became this famous speaker. So he turned his childhood unhappiness into his evolutionary trait. And this I can see when I work with people in past life, that sometimes it's our greatest misfortune that we can turn into something great. There's always evolution, and that's why it is so comforting. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That's within the life too. So the obstacles we face, it's here an opportunity. Again, they're hurdles, but we can jump over them, and we need to. I mean, that's part of the process too. What I also like is comforting that we get second chances. And it's again redoing things perhaps from the past life. And if you didn't do well in the past life, you can fix it. So but the focus is also, I find, also very much in the present, because this is the time where we can explore the past, and this is the time where we put the seeds for the future as well. So it becomes really vital of having that awareness, I think, of what's going on, and of really trying to connect with ourselves and whatever, again, that is, even going into previous lives. I find that quite fascinating.
I do believe that we all have a mission, that we all have a purpose. I like those psychologists who understand that, Viktor Frankl being very famous for it. He survived the concentration camps and he was observing people under the most horrendous circumstances, asking himself who would be most likely to survive anything, including himself. What is it that could help him to just stay in the belief that he will survive and he will do something great with his life. And he was thinking while he was in a Nazi concentration camp about going to America and giving a lecture at an American university about what he learned under these horrible circumstances. And just that vision, just that hope kept him alive. I think this is one of the most important things that is also very underestimated in modern times. It's very, very underestimated in modern approaches to mental health, where people come and they suffer from something like a depression, and then they get a pill prescribed. Mm-hmm. While in many cases, what appears as a depression is actually not finding life meaning, not finding something that is worth living for. Mm-hmm. So that is something very important, I believe. And I also believe that we all have our own life's plan or our life's purpose that we can find, or we can also shape. And we can really, truly be just happy when we found that. You know, the acorn, as James Hillman said, that deepest core in us that is our truest self and that wants to come out and wants to shine in this world.
Yeah, and it's our body and mind giving us information, telling us. So even like the connection too, if let's say I'm working really hard, I forget to eat, and then there's the feeling of hunger, and if I don't listen to it, there's the headache and so on. So I think that's the same with the mind is telling us, hey, something is off, and you need to address this. You need to pay attention to it. And then if you do take pills again to deal with that situation, but you're not getting to the root cause of like, well, what was causing this in the first place? And I love the life mission and vocation, because there's probably something that is, again, not in alignment. And to look at that, this is actually a great opportunity, again, talking about obstacles. Like you say, okay, well, why is it that I'm feeling like this? What is causing this anxiety, depression, fear, and so on? And really dive into that. And you find there's fascinating stuff that you can find, just like mind-blowing information you can get if you take a look at it and look at it closely, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as a student of human nature, like I describe myself, I love to observe happy people. And when I say happiness, I don't just mean that someone who's lucky or has a lot of material possessions, but like deeply happy people, you know. And I observe that those are the people who can work with any sort of circumstance, you know, who can learn to become a living alchemist, to turn everything into something positive, take any life circumstance and turn it to something valuable. And there's also a quote someone said, I don't know where it's coming from, but it really surprised me when I first heard that. And it said that happiness is the most underrated duty of a human being. Mm-hmm. And it was so strange to me to hear this first, because I wasn't brought up as believing in happiness as a duty. Happiness always was shown as something that is maybe a piece of luxury, you know, a cherry on top of a cake. If you do well in life, then you deserve a little bit of happiness. Mm-hmm. And when I heard this sentence that happiness is the most underestimated duty, I realized that, you know, it's the other way around. It's when we learn how to align with what you say, how to align with your purpose and with your work on this planet, in this life, then you're starting to become every day and in every way more and more happy. It doesn't matter what happens. A lot of bad things can happen, but there is this alignment that gives you a sense of joy and a sense of value, which sooner or later is giving you great ecstasy. So I see happiness as not, you know, a little reward, a little joy, a little entertainment, but it is actually a sign that you are on the right track. On the other hand, when someone is on the wrong track, they might actually have a pretty good life outwardly. You know, they might have a lot of money, they might have a family, they might have a job that is socially accepted or even prestigious, but you can see in their eyes that there's something missing. And then they go and they swallow those pills and they are, you know, going to sleep at night and they are just wondering what is the purpose of this all, which is a telltale sign to me that they haven't found what is their purpose. Purpose doesn't have to be big. You know, we are always thinking of something mind-blowingly big, like winning the Nobel Prize or whatever. But it's sometimes something outwardly small, maybe learning to appreciate certain things, learning to tune in more into nature, learning to tune in more into creativity, into family, into friends. And it might not look big from the outside, but from the inside, it is maybe a fascinating, great life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Karl Popper who says that it's like a moral duty to be happy, to be optimistic
It's a
about things.
moral duty to be happy.
Yes, and I
Absolutely.
love
That's
that.
exactly the point.
And I think,
Yeah.
like, for
Yeah.
me, like, something that I found inspiring was when in quantum physics, and again, I don't know much about that, but we say like it could be light, it could be a light wave, or it could be a particle. And so both are correct, even though they're kind of like opposite things. So that made me think, well, if I can see this in a negative light or in a positive light, well, and if it's the same thing, then why not choose the positive side? Again, that becomes here, I think, a moral obligation to choose the positive side. And it's not thinking of positivity, because I think that can also go astray if you just try to think always about the positive side by ignoring the dark side. I mean, it's there, but reacting in a positive way, in an optimistic way. And that kind of stance, I think, is something that we have to have, we must have as individuals.
Absolutely. And you just came down to the point. Is it like it doesn't mean this kind of toxic positivity that is very common these days, you know, when we're just trying to ignore everything that is dark and not so pretty in our lives or in our world. That would be actually quite toxic. You know, when we do past life regressions, we notice that there is a lot of darkness in all of us. There's a lot of darkness in our heritage, you know, whatever we inherited from the karmic past, or even inside our genes, inside a memory of ourselves. I mean, just look at 20th century history, you know, with the World War I, World War II, Holocaust, communism, Nazism. It's just a history that is like a horror movie, if you look at it. So we are all coming out of that soil. We are coming out of the soil of great suffering, all these generations that today live. So pretending the darkness doesn't exist is just not going to be a long-term solution. But we can go into the darkness with the intention to do some work there. So there are some really good techniques also in therapy where you can go into the past and you can see, for example, the same situation from everybody's point of view who is involved. You know, the perpetrator, the victim, the bystander, the animals, the humans, and just learn to see everything from everybody's perspective who's involved, which is pretty much the same thing as what we know from near-death experiences that happens to people when they die. You know, we are presented a life panorama, we are presented a spacious and, you know, beyond time and space, a panorama of all our actions, how it affects others, how others have affected us. So we can look into that. And then one of my favorite techniques is to go deep into it and find whether there is a positive intent somewhere in that, even if it's the darkest chapter. Like I had quite a few clients who came to me who are very conscious beings today, very aware, very much committed to personal development. And then you look at their past and they've been, you know, part of those atrocities in human history, like the Nazi past. And of course, when someone with the sense of responsibility today discovers something in their karmic past, I mean, that is a very heavy burden, you know, that's sometimes more heavy than remembering having been the victim. Having been the perpetrator is just as burdensome. So it needs some healing and it needs some inner alchemy to turn that around. And one of the favorite techniques, like I mentioned, is to look, was there any sort of positive intent or positive idea? You know, the Nazi idea had a positive core, which was the core of believing that there is an Übermensch. There is a higher human than what we are today. Where it went evil was by applying that only to the Germans and to nobody else. You know, we are evolving and everybody else is out. Especially certain races are out. So that's where it became evil. But the original thought that we can evolve beyond what we are today is a beautiful thought, no? So you could keep that positive thought and then including everybody. And then it becomes an evolutionary moment.
And
That makes sense.
in all fairness, that was based on Nietzsche's ideas, and Nietzsche's ideas are
It was
brilliant,
absolutely,
but it's been distorted, and that's the issue that we get, and maybe even in religions too, where some of the original messages are beautiful, but then it gets taken in a different direction, and so that can then create evil in some ways, and also a lot.
Yeah, and this is where we see evolution in action. No, that. And like you said previously, that we have second chances, and I think we have third and fourth and fifth and 100th chances,
yes,
because we are evolving an idea, we're making grave mistakes, and then we come back where we started, but the spiral goes up. It's not a circle. It doesn't go back to the same point. It goes a bit higher by eliminating certain mistakes, keeping the good things, and then spiraling upwards. I do believe, I don't have a problem with saying out loud, that I do believe that the whole purpose of the spiral is to reach higher and higher levels of happiness, joy, ecstasy. Yeah. If consciousness, like we assumed at the beginning, is evolving the entire universe as we know it, then I can very well imagine that the actual purpose of life is to exist and to enjoy that existence, to be happy in it, to eliminate those things that are causing suffering and to keep the things that are causing joy. It's like a big cosmic experiment. And we do get second chances. And it's not from the outside. Like I said, I think consciousness is a singularity at the end of the day. So we are, or I am, or you are, it's all the same. We are making a big cosmic experiment. And whatever I caused to someone else, I will feel it too, because that is also my consciousness. Eventually, yes. I will go to that point of view, and I will see it from there, and I will suffer whatever has been done to me by the same consciousness. Yeah. So it's an incredibly sophisticated system of evolution, as I see it. And the beauty of it is that when you are in there, when this is your paradigm, when this is what you believe in, then you notice that everything you're doing in your life is incredibly important. You know, there is no such thing as a boring moment. There is no such thing as an everyday day or everyday moment, because whatever happens, small things, big things in life, they're just seemingly small and big, but the decisions, like you said, it's your decision. It's your duty to choose the positive. And you have that chance every moment in your life, and not just you change with it, but the whole creation. So it values life very dearly. That's why I like this worldview, because it gives, we have the materialist paradigm that is devaluing existence. It says essentially nothing really matters. At the end, we will all die and forget about everything. It's very devaluing our existence. But I think this worldview is valuing our existence, and that's why it's a lot more useful.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of so in terms of enlightenment too. When we talk about light, I love that term, because it's light as in, there's the light we see, but it's also feeling light, and there's this lightness of being too. I think that's also part of it. And just to think about it, if you look at darkness and light, I mean, light is so much stronger than darkness. There's no match there, because if you turn on the light, the darkness is gone. So I think, and that's what we need to focus on more by making sure that the spark turns into a full flame there within ourselves. And there's this film that's kind of underrated and didn't do well called Tomorrowland, but they have this interesting concept. It's with George Clooney, and they had this interesting concept of there are two wolves. One of them is evil, and the other one is good. And the question was, which one will survive? And the answer is the one you feed. And so what do we focus on? Are we focusing on that the darkness and all the bad stuff that's happening? And are we getting engulfed in it? Or do we accept it and then try to deal with it and focus more on the good side, the opportunities we have, the second chances, third, fourth, fifth chances, and so on, and forgiving ourselves and being able to deal with those situations? Again, I think that's a choice that we do have on a certain level, each of us. And Even simple things like I used to not like the sound of the garbage truck when it would arrive because it's loud and it's beeping and it's annoying. But now I actually appreciate it. I was like, and so it's changing our stance towards something, how we react to certain situations or things can make a huge difference. And we can choose the more positive way of like being more relaxed, being happier, enjoying things more than the worrying side, the dark side, I would say.
Yes, although it's also about balance. So I like that you brought up this old story with the two wolves, because there is a side to it that is forgotten. And the side that is forgotten to that story, which I also learned about quite late after I've been quoting this story 100 times, is that in the original story, it's not about one or the other wolf winning. It's about balancing the two. So what we perceive as darkness is, under right circumstances, part of the whole. You know, evil is not equal darkness. Evil is an out of balance darkness. You know, because we also need the darkness. We also need, even for light to exist, we need the dark. We need the opposite in this dualistic world to even exist. I myself had a past life memory where I was a kind of warrior who went into battle and we lost the battle. But I had this proposition that I can make some sort of peace agreement. So I talked the enemy into letting me go home into my town or my homeland and talk my people into signing a sort of peace treaty. And they agreed to that under the condition that I would come back, which I knew that is going to mean that I come back and they are going to kill me, which is like the death penalty. But I gave my word that I'm going to do this peace treaty thing, and then I will come back and they can do with me whatever I wanted. And at that time, there was a question of honor. So I did go back, even though I had a wife and a small baby, and they were begging me not to go back. But I said, that is my honor. I have to go back. Another thing to learn, you know, from the past. And they did kill me, and not just in a quick way, but in a torturous way that involved cutting off the eyelids and putting my body out into the sun, tied down with 4 limbs, and just looking into the sun for as long as it took me to dry out and die of thirst or heat stroke or whatever it was. And I was looking into literally the light for I don't know how many hours or days on end, suffering from it. And in that moment, I can guarantee you that darkness would be the absolute bliss that could have come upon me. So I like to remember this story, and I like to quote this story because darkness can be a bliss. We need a balance of the two. We need a balance of those two wolves. We're just so used to, you know, preferring one side. But I think there is a deeper kind of knowledge, and it's so difficult to talk about it because it's not the knowledge that I know about on the intellectual level, but it is a knowledge that I can more feel when I'm in nature, when I'm in ancient places of power. And that is this kind of sentiment that there is actually a harmony. There is a harmony in nature, there is a harmony on earth. And I think at the moment we are a lot into, we are in those times when we need to restore that harmony. I think that is also very, very important. Also allowing a lot.
And that comes to also the idea of vibrations and frequencies and energies, because it's also our state of mind. Like, what is the state of mind currently? If I'm worried, then I'm a different state of mind than when I'm happy.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think as part of that, and that's how I understood more of the story, is like making sure that we are feeding that kind of the positive energy, and still, again, always accepting that there's the dark side, we can learn from it, but again, not get trapped on it, because I think that's
not get trapped in it.
Down a lot. And so, there are lots of things that are happening that are awful, but that's always been the case. It's not specific just to our time, and things have been actually worse in many ways if we look back. So, but not getting again kind of trapped in that. There is a way out, and there is again the second, third chances and so on. And one of the things that I find fascinating is the law of attraction. But I was thinking about, well, the law of attraction depends on my state of mind as well. So if I am from a higher purpose and higher frequency, then I will attract things that are better. Whereas if I'm again lower and I'm worried, then I will attract that. So it's kind of like an interesting point that the onus is really on the self of making sure that, when things are going well with you, when you're in alignment, everything else will fall into alignment as well.
Yeah, because it's based on consciousness, right? So we have to break from that tradition of materialist science that works very well for, building airplanes and bridges and stuff like that. But when we study consciousness, we can't be objective in that sense. So if we can't study it from the outside, our consciousness is fundamental to it. So the quality of our consciousness is absolutely fundamental to what is happening in the world. I very much like this Buddhist metaphor where they say, there is a bowl of liquid. And then you show this bowl of liquid to a hell being. And the hell being says, yeah, it's full of pus and blood and stinky stuff. And then the same bowl you show to a human, and the human says, yeah, I see, it's full of water. And you show it to a god, and the god says it's full of nectar.
Wow, yes.
I think that illustrates exactly what you just said, exactly. Is that as our consciousness evolves, everything else evolves around it. And I also noticed that things that looked really bad or horrible from a lower frequency is not that bad anymore when you're understanding it on a deeper level. So I'm fully with you. This is absolutely the same experience that I'm making by studying consciousness, is that the quality of your consciousness is actually what determines everything. Without that, you are just, it's a kind of virtual reality. It's a little bit like we would be in I don't know whether we are in a computer simulation, like, some science fiction authors are saying, but it's similar to that. It is very similar to that because consciousness is creating everything around us. So in a way, we are simulating things to experiment with them, I guess.
Yeah, and to connect with that, I would like to talk about the importance of stories, like what they do and how they contribute to that, dreams as well that we have, as well as our intuition. So what would you say about these things in any order you like? But how does that contribute towards like that discovery, that search, that quest that we have, and that connection with consciousness or even higher planes of consciousness?
Stories are very important to me. I write stories, I tell stories. I mean, hypnotherapy works with stories. We look into what people have in their subconscious, what they believe in, what is their narrative about their own lives, how do they interpret their own lives, past lives. All of these are stories. And I've always been absolutely fascinated by stories. And it wasn't until I actually met Raymond Moody, the father of modern near-death experience research. And we were I was very lucky because it was a small little seminar in London, and he had a lot of time and he spoke with us on a personal level. And I got the chance to talk to him afterwards a few times. And he said one thing that was absolutely kind of like a aha moment for me, where he talked about people who had near-death experiences. And they all said essentially the same sort of thing. They said, okay, you die, your physical body dies, but your consciousness is still working. It's still there. But it's very hard to talk about that. It's very hard to talk about what is happening after death. Everything that they're saying is a sort of like a metaphoric kind of approximation of their experience, but it's not the experience itself because it's no longer a story.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So in death, life stops being a story. Yeah. And when I heard that sentence, I was thinking to myself, oh, wow. But that also means life is a story. And of course, that's why we love stories so much. It doesn't matter what a hardened materialist you are, you still can't live without stories. You will eventually go to the cinema and watch a movie, or you will read a story to your child, or you will even just read the newspaper, even if you just need to read the newspaper. It is full of stories. If you're interested in sports, it's also a story. Like, we are all obsessed with stories. And I think it is because stories include something deeper. They include a sort of blueprint of the kind of experiment that is going on this level of reality on which we are currently at. Yeah, we all know about the hero's journey, that this has been discovered, that all the stories in the world have a sort of similar structure. There is a hero, there's somebody, so there's a subject who is usually experiencing some problem or some unsatisfactory situation out of which something arises. He gets a calling, then he refuses that call first, but then he's going with it, and then he has friends and enemies and tests and trials. At the end, he gets or does not get the reward. And that structure is sort of, it can be applied to anything, like you ran out of milk. That's your problem. Then you can choose to go to the shop or not to go to the shop. You want to drink your coffee. So you go to the shop, you forgot your money, to go back, then you buy it, then you come home and problem solved. So the smaller things and the whole world history, the biggest, are based on that scheme. Yeah. Therefore, for me, that's logical that it means that that's a scheme of life. Yeah. And the scheme of life, if you look at it as a story, then this is what it is. It's you have an adverse situation. And then you're going on a quest, you're going on some sort of adventure where you meet friends and foes and you face your tests and trials to solve it. And I think this is where this positive thinking that kind of positive thinking comes into play. What we were discussing is that you are positive in your story when you are working towards a positive conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not a problem avoiding mentality. It's not that, I just pretend I don't have that problem, but it's embracing that problem or embracing that challenge and saying, yes, now I have a chance to experience something new. And then no matter what the tests and trials are, you're going to triumph. I always say to my clients when they struggle with, making a life decision, what shall I do next? Shall I, quit my job that I'm bored at? Shall I quit that relationship that is no longer satisfying me? Shall I go to this journey that I've been dreaming about for 100 years? Or shall I take up writing, painting, music, whatever? And I always tell them, well, just look at your life like it's a movie.
Yes. Yeah.
You are on screen and you're watching your own life. Would you want to continue watching it? Or would you walk out of the cinema? Yeah. If you would be wanting to walk out of the cinema, then it's not worth living it, right?
Yeah. Well, the fantastic.
It's only worth living it if you want to watch it. So make sure that your life is a story that is worth watching. Yeah. Then you know what is the right next. Usually,
one of the lines I really like from the German rap group, the Fantastischen Vier, they have this line where you're the actor, you're the screenwriter, and the director of your own movie. So I think that's quite fascinating, and we don't realize.
And you're the audience.
And you're the audience as well. There you go. Yeah, and I think that's
it's exactly like that. Yeah.
Because we don't realize it's a story because we would see it once it's done. Then we have the beginning and the end. But we are a story in progress and we can change those directions. That's where the creative aspect comes in. If you don't like your story, there's certain things that you can perhaps change or you need to understand better and deal with it. And so that's quite important. But one of the things I found most fascinating was with foes, because they're the ones who I think have really helped me the most. Those who were opposing, right? Because that's where I jumped. It's like incrementally, I kind of slowly growing with friends, and it's good to have them. But when you have the foe, that's when you're challenged, and that's when you grow the most. And I don't feel resentment necessarily for them. I just feel like I am in the moment, of course, but then afterwards I realized what they did help me a lot, and I appreciate that, even though they didn't mean well, right?
Yeah.
It's quite fascinating in that sense. So I just want also
it is. It's a bit because the foes and the tests and trials, they are resistance in life, and it's the same as when you go to the gym, right? And you want to train some sports, and you need the resistance. If you don't have the weights or some sort of challenge,
yes.
then your muscles are not going to grow. And in the same way, your muscles are not going to grow. Your mental or your psychic or your energetic muscles are not going to grow if you don't have a foe, if you don't have a situation that you have to face, if you don't have something. But it has to be a little bit, again, we aiming at balance, like if I haven't done any training and I go to the gym and for the first time I try to lift the heaviest weight, what is probably going to happen is I'm just going to pull a muscle and then I can't train for a month. So I think in life, it's also very important to face your foes, to face your problems, and also to go out of that famous comfort zone, but in steps that you can take. And also to forgive yourself if you can't take a bigger step, or be gentle with yourself if you can't take a certain step, and then just rest a bit, learn a bit more, read about it, talk about it. That's when you need your friends. They can give you some good advice maybe, or just like a shoulder to lean on. And then when you're ready, you go out there. So it's like picking your fights. It's a martial arts advice. You pick your own battles. That's, I think, is also quite important sometimes, that you don't need to get entangled in any sort of thing if you don't. Sometimes you have to, because life forces you, but sometimes we also have a choice to step back from things that maybe don't serve us, or they are just too big or not at the right time, maybe.
I find it very interesting you mentioning the gym, because I have a story about that. I was strongly resisting it, and I thought that's something I don't want to do, and I hate. And my focus was mainly for health was really the mind. I need to work on that and so on, and kind of neglecting the body in that sense. And now I've been working out, and I'm actually enjoying it. So there's that switch too. It's like I would never do this, and it's like, well, give it a try. Well, actually, I'm changing my story. Now this character will go to the gym to get healthier as well.
Yeah.
As a kind of balance, like you're saying. I think that's very important. Yeah.
It is very important. And I think it's very true what, the ancient Greeks said, that in a healthy body, you have a healthy soul. Yeah. I mean, I've studied reincarnation a lot, and I did come to the point. It was actually very hard to begin to study it, because I come from a very academic family. My father was this sort of archetypal scientist who believes in the periodic system and nothing but the periodic system, and everything spiritual is sort of nonsense. So it was for me not easy to just jump into a topic like that. And it was when I read about, Stevenson and Jim Tucker and those researchers who were studying children who remember spontaneously past lives.
Yeah.
And I read all these cases, and I was thinking to myself, well, there is something. The details are too specific, and it just happens too often in a kind of very, very precise way that I don't know what this is, but this is something important. Something is happening here. So that pushed me to actually take it seriously and start investigating it and start working with clients on past lives and things like that, which I absolutely did not regret, because it gave me the key to a lot of evolutionary understandings. But it started like that,
Well, the fascinating thing too is the evidence is there. You may say the proof is in the pudding, and there is a lot of evidence that is there, but a lot of people are ignoring that. So I think also, like, when you have experiences and so on that show this, and research that's done, I think we can overcome that fear of death, because we're often too, like, some people just don't accept it, and they don't have an open mind in that sense. Like certain scientists, even though they would disregard on all the evidence that's out there. But I'm thinking, well, what if you're spending your life in fear of death, of something that is not the end? You just assume it's the end and you get there and it's not. So you just basically were worried over nothing. And that's why I like, in a way, Pascal's wager, though it's more intellectual, but I was like, well, what about this? I mean, that openness, like, what if? And I always ask myself the same question. And if there is no death or end and consciousness does continue, what are we so worried about throughout our lives? Why are we so afraid of things?
Exactly. It's actually very easy to overcome the fear of death. That's the sad thing. But there is this social, it's a type of religion, actually. You know, when you're just believing in materialism as a sort of paradigm that you don't want to question. And it is good, like I said, it is good to study the physical reality, to build machines and that, but it's not good to study the soul, because the soul is something that is not made of matter, that is not obeying the laws of matter. They're obeying other laws. Yeah. And when I work with clients on past lives, I like to do a series, because when we do a series of like 10 sessions or something, then you start to see the curve. You know, you start to see those topics and how the topics evolve and how they are unfolding in the present life. And then you can do some, some therapy on issues that need improvement or that can improve life. And then we look into where is that leading in the future? What sort of future do I want to go into? And because it's a series, people always relive their death. You know, I always finish every session with, you go to a moment of your death, and then you relive what is your predominant thought or feeling in that moment of death. And then with that thought and feeling, we go into the bardo state in between lives and see how it gets evaluated. And then you do it again next week with another life, and you die again, and it gets evaluated. And it's interesting that I never, ever, 10 plus years of doing this kind of thing, I never, ever had a person who couldn't do it, who couldn't go through his own death. And I never, ever had a person who was scared. You know, like the circumstances of death can be scary. You know, it can be a violent death or it can be an unexpected death. But that actual moment of consciousness separating from the body is never, ever scary. I mean, in one, it can be, you know, a relief when people feel that maybe their life wasn't so good and now it's coming to an end, or if it was a good life, then they are rejoicing over that. The only time when there can be, actually, I'm just saying that in parentheses, that the only time when there can be a negative type of death is when actually that fear of death or some sort of negative thinking is so overwhelming at the moment of death that creates that sort of fearful reality. That can happen, but it's very rare. But in my session, it was always a very, very okay. Everybody was okay with it. And then after a while, everybody said, like, I'm no longer afraid of death whatsoever, not even slightly, because it becomes a bit like, you know, children are afraid of the dark. They don't want to go to bed because they are afraid. So you need to leave the lights on, or you need to read another story, or you need to have a cup of cocoa or whatever. But then they become a bit bigger and they realize it's not a big deal. You just go to bed, you sleep, and then you wake up in the morning. And it's the same with death.
Love that.
It's when you're childish, when you are not, you've never looked at it, and you're scared of it because it's the big unknown and it's dark and it's But then when you start to train your mind and you get, you know, acquainted with that, it becomes a very, very natural thing, just like life, death, morning, evening. Just one other cycle in life. You know?
It's like this.
So it's worth studying it. I mean, the one thing how people kill these days this topic, you know, I mean, there were heretics in medieval times, and they were burned at the stake if they said something that the mainstream didn't like. And today nobody gets burned at the stake, but there are ways to silence these topics. And one of the effective ways is to just make fun of it. You know, reincarnation and past lives, it has become a show business kind of thing. You know, there's talk shows about, you know, who has been Cleopatra in a past life, and then maybe do a little spooky movie on it. And it's been like downplayed. But in reality, when you start studying the subject, it becomes one of the most important subjects in the world because it is about the purpose of your very life and how to make that into something valuable.
Yes, and it's I'm thinking of like backpack you wearing with like heavy rocks, but then you decide to take it off, and it's liberating because you feel like yes, now I can enjoy life without fear of death. And I think that's the message that is missing, and that's what something like consciousness research, as you're doing, as well as the looking into past lives, is reinforcing that. And I truly believe like there is an afterlife from again personal experiences, but I think science is also kind of worried because you cannot replicate some of those studies. So of course you can't. It's a human life that's individual and so on. But I think there's a lot there. And thank you so much, Dr. Viktória Duda, on being on Rasha's World, of sharing your beautiful insights, the wonderful research that you've done and experiences talking about those. And I just want to remind everyone that your book is 25 Centuries Without You, which is a great read. I would highly recommend that. And again, thank you so much for being on Rasha's World today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for doing all this.